So I was back in my home state of Georgia over the weekend. Always converse with buddies when I go down there. A lot of Georgia fans, obviously, that are double drunk on the Kool-Aid, back-to-back national championships, and you can imagine what the energy is like in the state, from Clayton to Valdosta and Brunswick to Rome and everywhere in between. So there is this natural inclination, for some reason, that people have when they win, to think that they're still being disrespected and to think that they're still being doubted. Why? Because that's the only fuel that could ever sustain success. You couldn't just have inner drive. It's got to be that you're doubted. So I got buddies who feel this way, and so you'll have to excuse me as I channel an entire chunk of this show towards like half a dozen people I know, because I know they're not the only ones who feel this way. You remember this time last year? Yes, you probably do. How much do you remember about this time last year? This time last year, we're sitting here in May. Georgia's coming off winning their first national title in several lifetimes. And no one was talking about them. It was the craziest thing, including us. I've talked about this publicly. You go back and look at our inventory. We did so little Georgia coverage during the spring. And most of the national shows did the same thing. The reason is because a couple of things. Number one, the NIL thing was blowing up off the field. It was the Saban Jimbo. That was kind of the poster for it. But the NIL stuff was blowing up. The recruiting calendar was being flipped. Simultaneous to all that, you had conference realignment happening. We were about to stumble upon USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. So there was all this chaos. There were like multiple college football volcanoes blowing up to where even though Georgia had just done something historic, it's like no one had time to really focus on it. And I remember our attitude here. Our attitude was, oh, we got all summer to talk about it. Well, the thing about it is you can't keep saying that because eventually summer turns to media days, turns to fall camp, and what happened? Where did the time go? We didn't even really relish that Georgia national championship. It's kind of happening again, is my point. It's kind of happening again. Got a lot of stuff going on off the field. Kirby and Georgia just went back to back, and it's kind of happening again, which leads some to believe they're being doubted and overlooked. So I listen to that, and on the surface, I think to myself, you are outside your mind if you think anyone still doubts Georgia. So I did the most scientific thing that I could do. I texted like 10 people and put it out there on Twitter. What's more scientific than that? And the last thing we do on this show is question science. Remember the experiment we ran with the Ohio State National Championship prediction? Science predicted it, not me. So I did the same thing. Okay, I went in the lab and I wanted to find out. I wanted to test my theory. Are there any Georgia doubters out there? Turns out there are Georgia doubters out there. Now, not in Vegas, because Georgia's the favorite to win the national championship this year. But here we are in 2023. They're back-to-back national champs, and there are a surprising number of doubters. They don't doubt that they just won the titles. There's this thing out there, and it's for different reasons, so let me just see if you fall into any of these categories. There's this thing out there in the subconscious of college football that, frankly, I don't think a lot of the national types are going to pick up on, because you got to be in the weeds a little bit. You got to be talking to actual fans to pick up on this. But it's there. There's a respect for Georgia. I'm not saying there's not. There is an admittance they've been the best program in the country the last 2 years. There's an admittance that they are recruiting like a machine. Kirby Smart's the real deal. So people aren't doubting it that way. Here's what the doubt sounds like. And again, I'm just the messenger here. Like I said, you wouldn't arrest a guy for just delivering drugs from one person to the other, would you? No. So being the middleman's fine. And as your middleman, I have to dutifully inform you tonight that some folks just don't really take you as seriously because they look at what happened in 2021 and they really think if Bama would have been healthy, you wouldn't have won that title. And they look in 2022 and they say, TCU? Whomst amongst us wouldn't have beaten them? I mean, the time you really got pushed was against Ohio State, and they hung 40 plus on you. Your own head coach said you should have lost the game. Again, middleman. I think this is going to end up in a Georgia Hype video, Jesse. Knowing how they roll up there, I could see this ending up in a Georgia Hype video. They also think the SEC East has been a joke. They're kind of right about that. I mean, I can't argue on that part. Like Clemson, when they were making their run, everybody would look and say, oh, well, anyone could win the ACC. Okay, but, and this is me now speaking, even if you do, you don't get to breeze through the playoff. You eventually have to run up against a really good team. Do you beat them? If the answer is yes, then you were legit. Here is what I will agree with. And this is one of the core philosophies that you always have to guard against when it comes to winning national championships and anytime you start to build up a big run. The dominance sometimes can be overblown. And in Georgia's case, the dominance has been overblown. I've seen it happen with Bama. The dominance sometimes got overblown because your mind works in highlights and snapshots. Your mind does not work in all 22 film review. And what I mean is this. When you think about 2022 Georgia, what do you think about? You think about dominance. What you don't think about is Missouri led you by 2 possessions in the fourth quarter. Ohio State, like I just said, is a missed field goal away from you not even playing for the title. And that doesn't negate it at all. That's how football works. I'm the first to tell you that. What I am saying, though, is sometimes you'll be sitting on the porch at Cracker Barrel and that little buzzer hadn't gone off. It's not time to go sit down yet and order your chicken and dumplings. And you're just conversing back and forth about how unstoppable your team was this past year. No, they were perfect, but they weren't unstoppable. There were margins that were really close. And that leads to Preview Magazine season, and that leads to all this assumption in something that I don't believe in, and that is the carryover effect in college football and in sports. You don't get to carry anything over. Some of the players may be the same. Some of your coaching staff may be the same. Some of your core tenets may be the same. Your philosophy most of the time is unchanged, but your record is 0-0. When you take the field in August and September for real games, your record is 0-0. And there's this thought, even if people don't articulate it this way, that, well, if you've won a title, if you just won 2 in a row especially, there's just this wave that you're riding that builds or I guess gets created because of that success. And in reality, it's the opposite. In reality, the success that you just had builds up a little bit of a riptide that you have to push against because of the net result of everybody placing their crosshairs and their focus on you. Not even to mention some of the stuff that can creep up inside your own building. I'm not even talking about that. So there are people who doubt Georgia. It doesn't matter that they doubt you because they can't come and confiscate those trophies. So when we did the mood tracker for Georgia a couple of weeks ago, I said the attitude of the fan base was sorry, not sorry. You can listen to all these folks talk about how this meant a little less or that didn't mean quite as much. It doesn't matter. That's football. That's how it works. You won the titles. You don't give them back. You don't ever apologize for them. That's one way that people can doubt you and disrespect you and hate on you. But it was brought to my attention earlier today that an acquaintance of ours had taken it a step further. And so no one can question the championship Georgia's won. No one can question the recruiting. But there are still things that are at least somewhat subjective out there that are in a state of flux as it relates to public opinion. So our I don't want to go as far as to call him a buddy, but our acquaintance, Brandon Walker, took to the airwaves of Unnecessary Roughness there. Jack's there, Katie's there, Casey, welcome back Casey. And they were talking about the most intimidating atmospheres in college football. And Sanford Stadium crept into the conversation. And Sanford Stadium is your cousin who lost 100 pounds, but you didn't witness because you didn't go to the last family reunion. I am telling you I've experienced it. I've experienced Sanford Stadium be a middle-of-the-pack SEC environment as recently as a few years ago. I've also witnessed what it's become. So the argument amongst the folks there, and Brandon Walker leading the charge, was it's not even a top 5 environment. It's not even a top 5 game day atmosphere and stadium atmosphere in the SEC. And that used to be right. Until like 36 months ago, that used to be right. It is not correct anymore. Sanford Stadium is like a whole new world now. You might as well have a Disney princess sing a song about it. It's like a whole new world now. I've been there. So you know what we do. We go on the road every Saturday. We stand on the sideline every Saturday. We don't hop in a private jet and go home after pregame. We are there every Saturday. So I am probably the best source on this because I actually don't even have favoritism here. I talk about all these places with brutal honesty. At Georgia, this used to be a sweater vest special, man. This used to be like a Microsoft convention, and there just happens to be a football game being played in the background. It was pretty quiet. It was pretty unintimidating. What happened is a perfect microcosm of what Kirby did to the program. Kirby walked in and told them the way you do things is not going to work. Okay, and they overhauled everything about that program that needed to be overhauled. What happened was, and this was unexpected on my part, what happened was the attitude of the fan base ended up perfectly reflecting Kirby Smart's attitude. The fan base adopted his way of doing things, and left behind the previous way of doing things. And it used to be that showing up was enough. You know, barking in a stranger's face in a Kroger's parking lot, that was enough. Go Dogs. Well, now Kirby Smart walks in and says, it's not enough. Take off the sweater vest. You don't even need to wear a shirt. It's optional. Paint your chest if you want to. But come in here and make people terrified to play in here. We got 90-some odd thousand seats in here. Why in the world should anyone ever be able to hear on third down? And they did it. But the thing about it is, just like the cousin who's lost 100 pounds in the last year, if you're not at the family reunion, you still think he's fat. And your buddies, your sister, your cousins come back from family reunion and you say, oh, was Fat Teddy there? Teddy's not fat anymore. What are you talking about? Teddy's enormous. No, Teddy was enormous. Teddy just lost 100 pounds. Teddy lost a bill. You need to see Teddy. Brandon Walker needs to go to a game at Georgia. I'll take him. But again, we stay for 4 quarters, my friend. I'll take him. I think, if nothing more, if you would have been at the Georgia-Tennessee game last year, it would have changed your mind. All you need is one. I mean, it's not like anyone's going to every game and running case study on these places. Your opinion is born from the games you've witnessed. And so if you went to the Tennessee game last year, there's no doubt in your mind the Arkansas game a couple of years ago was like insane. It was a noon kickoff, which proves the point that, yes, noon kickoffs can be very, very legit in terms of atmosphere. Sanford Stadium, I'm not going to do the rankings. I'm not going to do the power rankings of SEC stadiums tonight. But I will tell you, because he texted me today, Brandon Walker texted me today, and he gave me 5 of them that he thinks are better than Sanford Stadium. Sanford Stadium is a better atmosphere than the Swamp is right now. Sanford Stadium is a better atmosphere than Kyle Field is right now. And I think the world of both of those places. I'm just telling you what Sanford Stadium has turned into. It wasn't this. As recently as 3 years ago, I would not have said this. They've just transformed that place. And I just told you who I think deserves the credit, but even if Kirby Smart preaches it 8 days out of the week, man, the fan base has still got to adopt that, and they have. So I know it's not the first time I've said it. It probably won't be the last time I say it this week, but Brandon Walker was wrong. But God bless him anyway.